Subscribe now.
Hey everyone, good evening or afternoon, depends on where you are in the world. And Dana's back. So she was out for 1 week, but she's back, so it wasn't the same without her. And we're trying something different. Mr. or Dr. Russ Jones is actually already in the studio, so we're going to kind of run through the quick intro with it while Russ is here. So we'll talk a little bit about Russ before he speaks, and then we'll kind of get into it from there. So how you doing?
Sounds good. I'm doing good. It's good to see you guys. I'm back. I know you missed me, and I know it was super boring with just Tim. No, it wasn't.
Well, I wasn't. I might have been boring, but Steve,
good, baby.
Steve Coles was pretty cool. So Steve made it fun. So
yeah. I had a crazy couple of weeks taking care of my niece, so I needed a little breaky poo, but now I'm back. So super excited.
Yeah. So make sure you guys check out our website. Send us. If you have an encounter or a story you want to share, go to the website. There's a contact us portion on there. Just reach out to us. Let us know what you think about the show. We just want to hear from you. And then I thought we'd talk about a little bit about maybe an influencer that's in the news. And Russ has already talked to this gentleman. His name's Michael Freeman. And actually, let me pull in his new book. See if I can do this.
Yeah, and why don't we talk about who Michael Freeman is?
Yeah, you guys go ahead and start.
So Michael Freeman is the son of Paul Freeman. So Paul Freeman is a researcher that has a couple of very interesting videos of a potential Sasquatch. And it's probably, in my opinion, like the first time I saw it, I was pretty amazed by it. And I know there's a lot of controversy that rolls around the Freeman footage, but I remember being really like taken back with it. So Michael is the son of Paul Freeman, and so he just recently wrote a book.
Right, it's called Freeman Bigfoot Files, and there's it's also like my book, published by Hanger One Publishing. So there's a bunch of cool elements in it. It's color photos. I know Russ has got a sneak peek at it already. I think maybe I shouldn't have said that on air, but it's just really. I'm looking forward to it. You can pre-order it now. Actually, here, let me pull it up here on the screen here. I'll share this a little bit with you guys for the folks who can't see this. We'll do our best to describe it. Hey Russ, are you seeing that shared screen?
I don't see the Freeman book.
Yeah, you're doing it differently.
There we go. Now let's see if I can do this. How about now?
No.
Man, Alex is gonna shoot me. I was so good at this 2 weeks ago. So I see what I did. It's good because I gotta share your website later, Russ. So here's the, if you guys want to check it out, here's it on Hanger One Publishing. You can go on and pre-order it.
Can you see it, Russ?
No.
Oh
no, baby. You're doing it differently than you normally do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I have Brad, and he does all the tech stuff. I just show up and talk. Oh, there it is.
I did it.
You did do it from the help of me.
so there's it on Hanger One Publishing. You guys go check it out. You can pre-order it right now. There's QR codes that links you to a ton of audio and just a ton of photos that have never been seen before. There's chapters by I know Doug wrote a chapter, Doug Hychek, Cliff Barrickman, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Jonathan Summerlin, who's the grandson of Wes Summerlin, Dar Addington, who was part of the research team with Paul Freeman and Tom Powell. They all had input in the book, so I'm super excited to check it out. So and I believe, and Russ, I'm not sure if it's already been aired, but you guys are going to be on Wide Open Research. You're going to be interviewing Michael Freeman here shortly, right?
Yes, I don't know. It's probably like maybe 2 weeks from now, something like that. How many weeks are we out with you guys seeing me?
So this
a week out?
Yes.
Okay. So probably about the same time, maybe a week later. I'm not sure
Oh,
I get
good.
confused. You know, you interview somebody and that's like a week or two before they show up on your show, and so
I know.
it's
I know.
weird.
Yeah, we're still trying to bank a couple extra ones, but we're like this one. You're about a week out. So what we're recording tonight, the audience, you guys will see it or hear it in a week from now.
Yep.
So that's super cool. Yeah. So check out the Michael Freeman. He's definitely it's something that there's a lot of questions about it, and I think it just sheds some light to it. If nothing else, it just sheds some light, and everyone can make judge by their own opinion.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah. So we got Dr. Russ Jones in studio.
Woohoo.
Hi. Thank you
Russ
for having me. It's good to see you guys.
Yeah.
It's good to see you too, Russ.
Wish
You're
I was
like,
seeing you guys in person.
I know, you're like one of our favorite Bigfoot people.
Mm-hmm. Why's that?
Why? Because
Yeah.
you're just so down to earth and so super cool and so knowledgeable and just just like an easy person to connect with. So
Well, thank you so much.
absolutely.
And one of the nicest guys you'll ever
Oh
meet.
my
in the
God,
world.
yes.
I mean,
one of the nicest guys, definitely, for sure.
Well, thank you guys.
Yep.
and we appreciate you. We've gotten really close to Russ over the last few years, and
Mhm.
he's become a good friend. So I'm just honored and privileged that he was in the book, number one, and
Mhm.
number two, that he just become a good friend. So thanks for that.
One day when we move to West Virginia, we'll have you over all the time for dinner parties.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I'd have you guys out in the woods all the time.
Yeah, that would
You'd
be
be-
super cool. We would love that.
You'd be quitting answering the phone because you'd be like, he wants to go in the woods again. It's cold today. Let's forget it. Don't answer. Let it go to
Spam
voicemail.
caller.
I don't care if it's cold. I prefer when it's cold in the woods. So
No, yeah, we don't have a ton of woods. I mean, we have a stretch right behind the house here that we get
Mhm.
out, Russ, and it's the terrain's flat. I mean, we're in Delaware,
yeah,
but we don't go out there in summer. It's just
there's just no way you'll survive. It's very humid down here where we live, and so the mosquitoes are out of control.
Wow.
So we're just surrounded by water, ocean, lakes, or not lakes, ponds,
the bays,
marsh, bays. So the mosquitoes will.
Yeah.
Remember that one time we were hiking?
They swarmed. Yeah, they were swarming.
And they were biting through our clothes. It was horrible. So we just go hiking in the winter. That around here.
In the fall.
Yeah.
I mean,
in the fall. Yeah. Like right now, we've been hiking around in there. But yeah, it would be super cool to hike around where you live or in Ohio for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, I usually go out unless it's 30 and raining. I wouldn't go.
Okay.
But other than that, I would go.
How about 30 and snowing?
That's cool. I'd go.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with being cold is you can just layer up and be okay. It's kind of like skiing. Like you just layer up and you'll be okay. That's kind of way that when it's hot, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
So I think I do much better hiking in the cold for that reason. But normally what we do, Russ, is with our show is, we're the Bigfoot Influencers podcast, and we are interviewing the Bigfoot influencers, and you are an influencer. So we always like to ask some personal questions. They're not going to be too personal. And we already know some of your answers because Tim interviewed you in his book. So
the running joke is, Russ, I think I could do the podcast for you and talk about you.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
I know. All of our friends, they've heard us so much. They kind of know. They know our stories. They know. That's why I try to get new stories. So, maybe not everybody's heard my stories.
Right.
So actually, that kind of after we get to your personal questions. So that's why tonight we thought we're going to try to hone in on just one or two topics because you've got so much. I mean, we could have you on for like 6 different podcasts. There's just so much information you have. So
I know Tim and I were like, how are we going to keep this to an hour with him? Because you've just got so much stuff to share. So we're going to try to skip through some things because we want to get to the really the meat and bones of what you do and what you are about in terms of Bigfoot. So one of the questions I definitely want to ask you is when you were younger, did you spend a lot of time outdoors?
Yes. I grew up in this family that was very, very outdoorsy. People would come for long distances to see how many bucks that we had hanging on the first day of deer season. And people would come and try to buy my grandfather's coon dogs and rabbit dogs. And we were in the woods all the time for every single thing that you could hunt. We all trapped, and we all fished. We were in the woods all the time, ginseng, anything that we could. We didn't know any differently, and I was raised not to know differently. And I can remember that I was 7 years old. I had a BB gun, and on Thanksgiving Day, everybody would eat, and then the men would go rabbit hunting. And my grandpa had saw a rabbit that was sitting, and I took my 30 shots to, hit it. And then, I had to finish it off or whatever, which I probably couldn't do nowadays. But all the men stood around watching me do that, kind of as part of the club or whatever. And
so I don't know what you mean by you couldn't do that nowadays.
So, trapping was very popular when I grew up, and a lot of us did it. And, I can remember one year in the 70s, I wouldn't have been that old, and I probably made around $10,000 from trapping, which was a lot of money for a teenager to have without a job, just from coons and different things that I had trapped. But I didn't want to put holes in the pelts of the animals that I was catching. So normally I carried a baseball bat, and that's how I dispatched of everything. And now I'm too soft. I couldn't have done that at all. If I was going to do it, I would just had to have like, a small pistol or something to do it. But that's
because
not how
you were
I did
trapping
it.
For fur as opposed to meat. Okay.
Yeah. For coon, fox. We had no coyotes then. Mink that you could catch, muskrats. We get snow on the ground, and we'd follow fox tracks, and you're able to tell the difference between a red fox and a gray fox by their track. And red fox was worth around $120, and a gray fox was worth like 70. And so then we'd follow where they hold up, and we'd put traps in there and block them in and keep going until we had trapped all of them or whatever. But it was a different time then. And, I was thankful to be raised that way. I'm sure I drove my grandpa crazy, but, he's the one that, really encouraged me. And all my family members are really like that. When we were all younger, it was a big deal for us. So, yeah, I was out all the time.
So what was it like spending all that time in the woods with your grandfather?
Magical. He was the best outdoorsman I ever met or ever knew. He was kind and humble. And, I can remember he would, shortly after dark in the fall, after you ate dinner and you fed the dogs, it was time to go coon hunting. And, we would be in the most remote place in Southeast Ohio. The county we were in only had one stoplight. It's a big place for Bigfoot sightings still. And we were in the national park and also in state forest that was there, spending a lot of time doing that. And then he would wake me up the next morning and tell me it was getting late, and it was like 6:30 or 7, and he wanted to go rabbit hunting. And so then we'd rabbit hunt until the afternoon, come back and, have a snack, take a nap, and then we would go coon hunting at night. And a lot of times on the weekends, people would be doing their date thing or whatever, but I didn't do that. I was usually with my grandpa, and we were in the woods. And so it was interesting. There were several places that I dreaded when he was going to take me because, we had no good flashlights. You had one flashlight for spotting, say, coons, and it was like this big battery that screwed down. I don't even remember what, 8-volt maybe or 12-volt. I don't remember what it was. And so you weren't allowed to turn it on because if you got back there, a couple hours back in the woods and your light didn't come on, you couldn't get the coon or whatever. And so we followed him by his carbide light. And the carbide light just has these little rocks in it made by Union Carbide, which ironically is, real close to my house here. And it would like a miner's cap, and it had a reflective lens, and water would drip down on this rock, and a gas would come out, and you would light it. And it was like a candle, but it had a reflective lens.
That's cool.
That was the only light that you had. And, he's walking through the woods. Most of the time there's no trails or anything. And it's cold because it's fur bearing season. And all these cold limbs are just smacking you in the face. And you're like so mad. You're like, oh, I'm going to get him. And so I have fond memories of that, him taking me back to these places that, no one would spend any time at, no one would go to. It was too far back in the woods. And, I remember one time in his wallet, he carried this little copper brush, And that's how you clean the carbide light out, is there's little copper wires, and you'd find a creek where you could get more water for your lamp, and you'd run this in and out of there. And it was really dark, and it was hard to do it anyways. But and we'd walked out, and it was maybe 2 hours to get out. And we came out on this forest road, and we had like a 2-mile walk once we hit the forest road. And he's like, he lost his wallet, and we had to go all the way back in there to that same stream. And I remember just, oh, wow. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. And then as he got older, he would sometimes get turned around. And so, I mean, I was always worried about getting lost. And I think that's one of the reasons why now I seldom get lost, because I just learned to pay so much attention, because I was always horrified. My grandpa, we'd be 2.5 hours back in some wilderness area, and he'd say, well, which way you think we need to go? Or whatever. And, so it
we can understand that.
Yeah, but it was funny back then. I had a couple of Bigfoot incidents. We didn't know anything about Bigfoot. And by the time I got, say, in high school, there was a couple of reports that came into the BFRO. And of course, I wouldn't be into that for, many, many decades later. And I was interested in it. And I remember asking my grandpa, we really didn't have bears in that part of Ohio. I mean, still in Ohio, they have 100 resident bears now, in 2022. So this is in the, 70s, mid 70s, late 70s. And, him telling me he thought it was a bear that people were seeing, because these guys had, apparently they were hunting, and they had seen this Bigfoot, and they had shot at it, and they wounded the animal. And then all these people, like 100 people, came down and circled this area of a park and pushed in, and people saw something. And later, when I became part of that group, I went in and actually saw those reports that were around that area. And there was other reports that came out of there. Mark DeWorth, which is, a mutual friend of ours, and I know he was on the show. I saw Mark had did one of the reports in that area, and I asked him about it. And he said that was the most afraid that I'd ever been at that one particular place. And it was probably within a 10, 15-minute walk of where I had many of my encounters. Mark had went to talk to a witness. And of course, the internet wasn't really around back then so much. And so, now you're able to look and see where these reports are. But yeah, it was, it was a good time. I can remember a couple different occasions hearing wood knocks and asking my grandfather what they were. We had no idea. He told me that people would slam car doors, and it would be way down a holler, and it would sound funny as it came up the holler. And that's what he thought it was. He didn't know any differently. Mm-hmm. And I always now wish that I could go back and in retrospect, or have him around and tell him the different behaviors that Bigfoot does, or places that he's at. And I'm sure that he would have an opinion on places to go, things that he felt weird about, or, maybe he'd heard something he couldn't explain. He was a county trustee. The people that, he worked at Austin Powder, which is a dynamite plant, but on the side, he was elected as a trustee, and he was in charge of, like so many gravel roads in Ohio or whatever. So he knew everybody. And we never had to ask anybody to hunt. He just knew everybody all the time. Whereas now in Ohio, if you don't own land, you can't hunt unless you're hunting in a state forest. It's all, Columbus is an hour drive away or something, or a little bit, hour and a half. And so the wealthy people in Columbus come into those more rural counties, and they buy the land, they have their getaway cabins, and they want to hunt. And, it's different than it was then. But like so much of our past, we don't recognize that things are a good time until much, much later, and we look back with perspective.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
So Russ, so you have like this time period of being like a child, a young man, wandering around in the forest with your dad grandfather, sorry.
And dad, but yeah.
And dad. So then all of a sudden you decide you want to be a licensed chiropractor. Like, what inspired you to take that career path?
I went to undergraduate in Indiana for 4 years. I was on a baseball scholarship, and I was going to be a psychologist, a PhD. And ironically, I was going to specialize in marriage counseling. And
Oh my
it's
God.
very
Wouldn't Russ be a great marriage counselor? Oh my God. I could totally see
not
that.
anymore. After a couple 100,000 patient visits, I don't have enough patience. Like patience with a C. I would be,
I could totally see you
rolling my
doing that
eyes and,
though.
Yeah.
but so you apply to all these schools, you don't know whether you're going to get in. So I started looking at other options of whether or not I'd want to do something else. And I'd always seen a chiro since I'd been a young man. My parents had always taken me, it's like not a neck pain, back pain, headache thing, but a general health wellness thing, which is what, I do a lot of my practice. And so in the end, I had to make a decision. I was going either to Iowa to chiropractic school after undergraduate, or I was going to the University of Kansas for my PhD. And I took 1 month, the last month of summer, and then I decided I was going to Iowa, and I moved to Iowa. And when I got out of school, I was familiar with West Virginia. That's where my father was from. Where I live now is maybe 2 hours from where I grew up in Ohio. And it was appealing to me to be able to live on a couple 100 acres, 15 minutes from the state capitol, and have bear and, everything you can imagine, that close to town. There's not very many states that you can do that in. And I was still following the Bigfoot stuff, but, you're busy when you're trying to build a practice. You're working 6 days a week. You don't take vacations. And, probably the only thing I did during that time was in the evenings, I would read the Bigfoot books that were out. And then, in the early 90s, there was not very many books. And Jeff Meldrum had just wrote Legend versus Science. I don't remember what year that would have been.
I don't think that was till 2000.
Yeah.
Because right around when the documentary, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he did that, he was speaking in Ohio. And I went up there, and of course, it wasn't as large then. Don Keating had it, just a couple hundred people. And I knew nobody. I wasn't involved in Bigfoot stuff. And I went and I met Jeff, and, he signed a book, and we talked for a few minutes or whatever. And then if you Google Bigfoot back then, I don't know if it's still that way now, it comes up, the BFRO would come up, my hat. And I would, I saw they, had like a dozen things across the country where you could go, and they took it seriously, and you had to pay this money, and you signed non-disclosure forms, and they interviewed you to make sure you're serious. And I thought, I'm going to go, but if they're weird, I'm leaving. And this is probably 15 years ago. And
I love it. If they're weird, I'm leaving.
I honestly thought
I'm surprised you're still there.
Yeah. And back then,
they're
Matt
weird
Moneymaker
but nice.
used to go. Yeah, they were weird but nice. But they were great. I mean, literally, like Brad Kennan, which I do the podcast with, Darren Pavarnik, a couple of my very best friends were there at that time. And, I've been good friends with them since. I spent a lot of time with Moneymaker that weekend, and Matt and I became friends, and he asked me to start doing everything for the group in Ohio and West Virginia. At that time, there really wasn't very many people. There really wasn't anybody who was active in Ohio. And I don't know.
So it's been about 15 years.
Yeah, about 15 years ago that I started doing all this stuff.
How many witnesses do you think over that from, that you've talked to from then to now?
When I did the first book, Tracking the Stone Man, which was out 7 years ago, I want to say that I had talked to 500 then, more or less. And now it's been another 7 years. The other book came out in December. And so I'm guessing that it's probably close to 1,000. I'm probably talking to people, I want to say 2 times a week that I actually talk to somebody, a new witness. And probably 1 or 2 other times a week, I'm getting a report from somebody on some type of social media that, is probably not good enough that I really want to talk to them, but I'm keeping track of, where it's at and whatnot. And, it's really all about relationships, where you're talking about relationships with park rangers or other researchers, or, just getting known in your area as that person that everybody wants to call when something happens. Because listen, tomorrow Bigfoot may get hit by a hunter shoots him, or a coal truck hits him on the road. So whatever it happens to be, I could be that man that they call. You just don't know.
Right.
You never know.
And I honestly believe it could happen at any time. Something could break. I mean, I've interviewed 3 different hunters that have had clear, close shots that didn't shoot. But, at some point, there's probably going to be someone that shoots, or, there's going to be some property owner that's, one's harassing or something, their property or their animals, or a traffic type thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I think recently I've come under the impression that if we did come across a body, do you think that, I don't know, maybe the government would try to hide it, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's people in government that know, but I'm not sure that there's like a policy, widespread across the government to, let's hide Bigfoot from the people or whatever. And I say that because, I mean, people have a hard time like keeping secrets. And, like when you're seeing patients like I do, a lot of them, these people want to tell you a story. And so I think that people would have to tell people, that
but even if they told people, would they be believed?
I think that, it's important to have a plan. Like, I think that when people go into the woods in a good area for the first time, that you just can't go in there walking. You have to have a plan in your mind for, if you find a track, if you have an encounter, if something happens, what you're going to do. And I think that any of us that are in the woods a lot and are serious about it, I don't think that Bigfoot's dangerous, or we would know because there would be all these stories. But I think things have probably happened. I think there are probably ones that aren't nice, and there's ones that are more benevolent. But I think that you have to be prepared for something to happen in the woods, especially if you're going back way in the woods. What are you going to do if, you get hurt? Are you carrying enough on you? I mean, probably until, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago, I didn't carry a weapon. I just carried a big hiking stick. I mean, I've never been afraid or bothered to be in the woods, and I'm in there all the time in the most remote sections. And I never really worried about it. But two things happened to change that. One was Brad Kennan asking me if I'd seen any of the missing 411 things, which David Clyde is.
Yeah.
Thank you, because we have.
Yeah, so I have read those books and whatnot. And 90% of them, I think, are probably medical issues that people have. But there's those several there that give you pause.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is, you come out of the woods many times in these remote sections. I find pot a lot of times in the woods where I'm at, they're growing it on state and national land. Sometimes you got these, tweakers that are out there when you come out and you're parked and there's somebody there. And I think that the final thread was I was in this park and it was a very, very steep hill, and there used to be mines there. And I was just sliding down the hill, and I was probably 50. And I thought, this is so sketchy. You could fall down or something here, and there's no cell signal, nothing. I thought, I need to have a way, if I have to spend the night, what do I need to feel comfortable? So, I always have a headlamp, and I always have extra batteries. I always have a gun now, and I always have a way to start a fire. And so, if there's going to be rain or whatever, I'll always have a jacket that's in my pack or whatever, but just enough stuff that I would feel comfortable getting through the night.
That's smart.
Yes. So Russ, every once in a while, if folks who are watching this, they may see me chuckle because you're answering like the questions that I haven't even asked you yet.
I know. I love it. We could just let you talk.
I'm like, wait a minute. You're leading right into it.
Awesome. I got my little flip chart I showed you before that Tim prepares me for. What essential items do you bring?
Yeah.
Like just answer. We could just turn our camera off and just let Russ talk, because it's amazing. You're such an easy interviewee. So
I was going to say, it's just that for so many years I just walked in there and I didn't even know what I was doing. I was a woodsman, and I'd been one my whole life, and by then I was a master naturalist too. But I just was, maybe I was naive. I didn't worry about what may happen or whatever happens to be. I don't really worry about the Bigfoot thing. I know I've taken some reports that have given me pause over the years where, it was, it wasn't like Bigfoot killed the person, but, there was some scary things happening, and it makes you think whether or not, would you handle that situation well? How would you do if you were there? And maybe the next time, like I took one a couple weeks ago, it was pretty scary. And so I know the next day I was in the woods, and I was definitely paying more attention. when I was in there than I was normally.
What was that story? What was it? And like, if you could like just briefly tell us.
You know, there was these two girls, and they were high school girls, and one girl, they were both been city girls, but they moved to Eastern Tennessee. Cherokee National Forest is right
Oh, I
there.
think I saw this story.
Yeah, I posted that on social media.
Oh my God. I sent that to you.
Mm-hmm.
I was completely blown away by that story.
Yeah, you know, the girl
Details were like crazy.
And, you know, that's what we're trying to do with the podcast. I mean, once a month, I'm trying to have somebody on that no one has got to hear their story. It's not a Bigfoot story that's been told. It's just, you know, there's some people out there that have these stories, and I think it's important that they're documented and they're out there so people can hear them. And, you know, that girl, it was a traumatic experience for her. And, you know, and particularly the other girl, you know, it didn't have a good outcome for her, but, you know, that was one of the ones, I think maybe the only one that made me think of, you know, would I handle it well? I know twice in just the last, say, couple of years, I have thought that I saw one. There's one time that I believe that I did see one, but it was just a glimpse, and I thought it was a hiker, and it wasn't very far from me. But then by the time I clipped shade on and started walking again, it was gone. And then I saw that it was off trail, and I realized what it was, and I ran to this ridge right there so I could look over the whole area, and it was gone. You know, our brain wants to tell us something all the time. It just wants to categorize things as we know it, you know, as what's most probable, what's most likely, what we have seen. And, you know, so sometimes that's just an issue for us. But the other times, one time it was like a stomp, and one time it was like a tree that was sitting funny. But I know that instantly, you know, my heart was, you know, really fast. And I thought, oh gosh, what's this going to be like when I really actually get a chance to, you know, to see one? But, you know, it's hard to get around them. I mean, you know, I think we need to be suspicious if people say that they're around them all the time and they're having all these encounters. You know,
I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, Steve Coles was telling me that a lot of folks get PTSD after they have a sighting, and he's had a couple sightings, and he said what helped him a little bit is he was already trained. He had trained his mind because he had went through something in his career that he had to
compartmentalize.
Thank you.
Yeah,
things.
Okay.
So he didn't suffer as much from the PTSD syndrome as some of the witnesses do that see that have visual sightings.
Yeah, because basically you're seeing a monster in the middle of the woods. I mean, it's not anything that we've seen at the zoo or we've seen like on like National Geographic, or it's something that shouldn't exist. And it's like seeing a monster. It's like seeing a freaking T-Rex in the middle of the woods. Like, it's not supposed to be there. So yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I think that's I try to prepare myself for that kind of stuff all the time. I constantly think about where I'm parking. You know, when I come out quietly. I don't come out at my vehicle. You know, I check to see if someone else is around. You know, I'm with Shade, my lab, all the time, which I heard him rolling around here on the ground somewhere around me. But, you know, I had to really train him because, you know, he's a lab. He'd want to run and get petted by whatever. So now, you know, even if there's someone there, you know, I can just make a hand signal to him and he'll just sit down and stay until I tell him differently. So I can always just check and see if someone's around. You know, and then this time of the year, you know, you have to save some of your places that you're going for places where hunters aren't, or, you know, like tomorrow I'm going to go to a place where I know that there'll probably be a couple hunters right now bow hunting, but I know that I just kind of stick on the trail until I get a mile or so in, that I know, you know, I'm farther back than they would bother to go because they don't want to drag some deer out of there in this place. But I mean, that's a hard thing when you're Bigfooting. You know, you're walking a long ways most of the time to get where a Bigfoot may be. Maybe not so much in Ohio, but, you know, certainly in most of the Appalachia states, you know, you can be in some pretty remote territory.
Right. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention, like, I remember like hiking with you in Ohio, and you have your walking stick, which has a GoPro on it.
Yeah.
And then I also remember you mentioning that you like put out trail cams too in certain areas. So can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have out at present 41 or 42 cameras. I probably have maybe 3 or 4 in my truck. So I probably don't have maybe 40 out right now.
Mm-hmm.
I try to leave them in place for about a year. I used to have them spread out over about 6 different hours. So one weekend I may be in the high mountains of West Virginia. The next weekend I was in central Ohio. And I would have just cameras spread out everywhere. As time has went on, I've concentrated on just a few areas as opposed to a million areas. And I'm not going to say if someone called tomorrow and they had something happen that was fresh that I would probably have to go and look around. But generally, I just don't ambulance chase anymore. It's just not helpful. You're better served to be in these particular areas all the time. I mean, there's probably something to be said for the animals getting comfortable and used to seeing you in that area all the time and thinking there's that guy that, he has that stick and then he has that dark colored dog that doesn't chase the animals. It just stays with him, and they kind of
Right.
get familiar with, I'm not saying necessarily Bigfoot, but probably them too, if they're in that particular area. I don't think that, people act like you go into the woods and Bigfoot's there and he's watching the whole time. I mean, these are a rare animal. I don't think that they're around like that all the time. I think that, it's like I said, if you go in the woods at night, which largely I'm going in the woods at night a couple times a year with friends to have fun, you're going for an experience. You're not going for evidence largely. People are not compelled by thermal image. I mean, there's some really good ones across the country that are out. Barcutino, the BFR group in California have captured some. Stacy Brown, had that one out of, was it Georgia or Florida down south? No one cares. The Bigfooters, compelled. We think it's awesome. We all like it. The scientists don't care.
Right.
So you're saying you spend most of your time out in the woods during the day?
Yeah, I used to not. I used to be out in the woods all the time during the day, but then I would make time every week or so to be in the woods at night too. But then it just got to a point where, I just realized that when I'm in the woods at night, you're just there for an experience. You want to hear them. You want to see if they come close to you. You want to see what happens. But after a certain point of time, I mean, it's fun when I do it with my friends, just to be out there and stuff. But you legitimately want to come up with some answer to this, so you're trying to be out there during the day to see, if you can just get lucky to have, like Doug Hychek, him and I had talked one time about video. And that's the reason why after I had that brief sighting 2 years ago, maybe 3 now, I don't recall, I have my GoPro on my hiking staff. And I've just trained myself that whenever I hear something or I look a certain direction, my cane just goes in that way all the time. So I'm looking wherever, it's pointing wherever I'm looking. I have not seen anything, since that's happened. I mean, it's cool because it's recording too. So, if you want to hear wood knocks or whatever it happens to be. But I mean, I just think that we have to move past all that stuff because, I think audio is good. Just people have the LDRs out there that, they can help us get when the Bigfoot are in a certain particular area.
Can you explain just for the audience, Russ, what an LDR is? Just in case there's some folks.
LDR is long duration recording, and out west they call it LTR, long term recording. But essentially, it's a device set up that clicks on at night, records all night, and clicks off in the morning. And they last about 6 weeks, the good ones. And people are changing them out, and they're keeping track of, for instance, Dr. Kenny Brown is in Ohio, and Kenny is really interested in it. And he records in a couple different areas. But if he knows it's an area that I'm in or I'm interested in, he'll text me and say, hey, this date, I heard this, and I'll put it on my calendar, just trying to continue to build data on where they may be. So then if you have an idea of where they can be, then when you're going out tomorrow, if I don't have anything on my calendar, I'm just going to a different area, different hollow. But it could be that I have something there from the past. I've heard something, I've seen something. And so I'm going into that area trying to increase the likelihood or my chance that I would have something because they've been heard or seen in that particular area at that particular time.
So, hey, Russ, I have a question for you. Okay. This is something that Tim and I run into a lot. Just because we're not researchers, but we're super interested in the subject, and we're, always, we're interviewing all of you guys, and we've neither one of us have had a Bigfoot experience. But we tell people what we do, and people are always like, "Oh my God, like you guys are like, crazy," or blah blah blah. Like what do you tell? Like, what is your elevator pitch for somebody who is not, really informed about this subject?
I think that you have to be comfortable with what you're doing and knowing that if they knew what you knew, they'd probably believe too. But where you guys live, nationally, say a third of the people more or less believe that Bigfoot is real or may exist. But in the Pacific Northwest or in Appalachia or in Ohio, part of Ohio is in Appalachia, the southeastern corner, it's much, much higher. It's well over 50%. It's rare in West Virginia that I would not have a patient tell me a story every day, a different patient. So I think that people can accept that there's parts of the woods that we never go into anymore, that people are not active in. And when I wrote the first book, I think I had like a few pages on what Bigfoot may be, maybe 5 or 6 different things were a possibility. And there was just maybe a few paragraphs or a page or something on each one. I mean, I could have did it for pages and pages on every one, but I just thought that if someone just laid out the evidence concisely and not overwhelming people when they got to the end, that people would say, well, maybe there's something out there, who knows, but it seems reasonable for us to, take a chance on that.
Just imagine you're at a dinner party. You're at our house here in Southern Delaware, and we're having a dinner party, and you're over, and there's like a person across the table, like, really, like, what do you say to them?
I mean, usually I'll tell them that, usually, honestly, like I probably wouldn't even mess with it. I think that when people get to know you and they know that you're, you have a couple degrees and you're some kind of doctor and you're a master naturalist, and they can talk to you and tell that you're bright, it gives them pause to think, gosh, I mean,
if Russ believes
for
it,
whatever, for whatever reason, there must be something there. But, I can tell them in reality, even as much time as I spent in the woods at night, hunting all these different things, and in the woods all year round, there's still noises and things that I have found in the woods that I can't naturally explain, that I feel like need to be explained. And I don't think that most people would object to that at all. I mean, most of the time I ask them, when's the last time you've been farther than a quarter mile, from the nearest road or trail? And we know from studies that even hunters, over 90%, are never farther than a quarter mile from a nearest road or trail. So you can imagine people that live in New England, that live in New York or Miami or Chicago. I mean, largely, they've probably never even been, in the woods. I mean, not like, what we're talking about. I just think it's interesting, that it's that way. I enjoy, I think it's romantic to believe that there's something out there that's left that we can discover that man hasn't found yet. And I think that there's a lot of us, there's probably maybe 100 of us that are legitimately heavy duty messing with it all the time. Only 100. There's probably several hundred that are interested in it and occasionally may go do something, but 100 of us are probably in the woods every week that are talking to witnesses. They're doing all this stuff, that we had something happen to us when we were younger that did not fit into our paradigm. And, we just can't let go of it. And, that's the way it was for me. I'm more involved now 15 years later than I was. I mean, I've always had an interest and always read every book. And when I say legitimately read every single Bigfoot book, I'm sure that I legitimately read every one up until, say, 5 years ago, when now the self-publishing thing came out. And there's a lot of books that, are maybe a little sketchy, that, maybe are, maybe they're books that are concentrating more on woo stuff that didn't used to exist at all, and now is very prominent in the Bigfoot community. And even those I would read just because I'm curious. Just like I look at all the stuff that's on the different social media sites because I'm curious about what people say or why they believe what they believe. And the podcast, man, I mean, you can find anything now. And so, you know, I listen to a new one today, and, you know, for a while you're listening, maybe it's not, they'll say something that's just not true or whatever it happens to be about the woods. And you'll say, I'm just not going to listen or whatever. But, you know, there's a lot of information out there. Like, you know, I like Sasquatch Chronicles, Wes Germer's podcast. You know, he's done, you know, 1,000 or something with, you know, different podcasts.
Crazy.
I mean, it's a crazy number. And maybe half of them aren't that good. Maybe half of them are pretty good. Maybe 100 are unbelievable. But in the course of listening to all of them and all the other podcasts, you know, you're just continually getting to hear different behaviors that Bigfoot may exhibit and different things that you may think of. And I always think about that when I'm talking, you know, on a podcast that, you know, maybe something I'll say will click with somebody else and they'll like, okay, you know, I thought about that one time and there's this one spot. And I just hope that, you know, because of that, you know, one of us will maybe help out some of the other ones. You know, like last week, you know, we were talking earlier, Dana, about the game cameras, and we were all debating on why is it that, you know, we don't have all these pictures of Bigfoot on game cameras. And so I had went through, and I don't think I have it in front of me now, but for the podcast last week, I was telling Brad, you know, how many cameras you would need to cover Ohio and West Virginia. West Virginia, the number was like 600,000 that you need just to cover one every 20 acres. Because, you know, a thing doesn't stay still, you know, it's moving through a territory. So eventually it would run in front of one of your cameras. And in West Virginia, I think that we have like maybe 175,000 because about a third of all the hunters are using those. And, you know, but last week I was communicating Reconyx makes the best camera. That's what everybody likes. They're just expensive. So, you know, taking the time to email and talk to their engineers about, you know, we think that something hears us, or, you know, how is it working exactly? Trying to understand how, you know, we can better step in there. There's a camera called Buckeye Cam, and their headquarters is only like 2 miles from my farm. And I've been there a couple different times talking to the engineers about, you know, they may not believe in Bigfoot, and the ones at Buckeye certainly don't, at least, you know, the last time I was there talking to them. But, you know, they can appreciate how serious you are about understanding the process exactly so that you can come up with an idea. You know, and I said before.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Russ. So when you say that they can't hear us, so are you saying like that the Sasquatches can possibly hear the camera?
Yeah, you know, cameras, there's been a lot of studies. They're about 30 decibels. So a child can usually hear them if they're around them.
Okay.
The more expensive ones are not quite as loud. And then there was a book called The Great Saul of Siberia about Siberian tigers. And, you know, I read it. It's interesting. I read books like that. I just finished a book called Great Shadows. It was about bears in eastern Idaho. I took 2 pages of notes concerning Bigfoot things in a bear book. And, you know, you're just always reading these different things, trying to understand that. But back to the cameras, you know, they had 32 game cameras, and 30 of them were destroyed by the tigers from behind. You know, the tigers
God, I heard this. I heard that.
Yeah, they were hearing those, you know. So, you know, how do we go about disguising those? Or, you know, I bought this material one time from Europe that I put my game cameras in, trying to block the noise and the EMF, all that out of them. And there's some other stuff I'm working on right now. But you could have a perfect setup, but how do you know that the Bigfoot went in front of your camera, you know, or is avoiding your camera? But
do you think that might happen with you and your GoPro on your walking stick?
I think that I think it's rare for us to be around them. You know, they probably, one of the things that I've really been interested in, you know how like when you're doing a book, like I'm looking here, there's like 3 topics that I really am interested in, but you just don't have enough to make it a chapter or maybe even a page. It's just something you're interested in. And for instance, like I see one thing I have this term that, you know, in my life in Bigfoot, like I talked about perches, which, and treat food are these two terms I've coined about Bigfoot. And I have one now I've been thinking about called postural communication. And, you have these people that say now that, they see these Bigfoot and the Bigfoot says something to them, or in their woods and they heard something or whatever happens to be. And so I don't really think that happens so much as that humans are really good at reading posture from other primates. We can tell from a distance if somebody's mad or they're happy or they're anxious or they're fat, and I think that our brain is so good that it picks up these cues. And I think people may hear, you shouldn't go in that area or don't walk there, whatever it happens to be. And it really is not something speaking to us so much as it's just the cues, the nonverbal cues that we have learned from the woods. Maybe we're not conscious of all the birds alarming because we're just not trained that way. But sometime in our past, there was our DNA, it's came through there that we have learned this in the past. And some of these things our body recognizes in our brain without us even being trained.
Yeah,
So
actually, I think I was reading something somewhere about how females, we are much more capable of reading facial expressions and emotions for the reason of, that we are physically weaker, and it was important for us to connect and create a bond. And so it was important, and it still is today, important for us to be able to read people's emotions by their body language, by their facial expressions. So, who knows, what other kind of things were going on by walking through the woods, like you were saying, like birds scattering, squirrels chirping, or,
Yeah. You don't have to be a master naturalist or a hunter or whatever, but somebody in your past was. And so, that the coding that goes on in our brains genetically, some of that comes down. I mean, like there's monkeys that, one island of monkey learns how to do something, and an island, 50 miles away that doesn't have any communication. All of a sudden those monkeys learn how to do that same function or whatever. And so I think that
that maybe we passed on our memory cells.
Yeah, we're passing on different features and functions like that. I mean, certainly we can't be sure how it works, but I think it's something to keep in mind when when we're looking at these things, and just like with the game cameras, I always say everybody wants like to get a picture of Bigfoot. I want one too, but and like if you saw the pictures, and you can imagine like 40 cameras. I mean, I'm looking at hundreds of thousands of pictures a year. I mean, like I pulled one last week and I think there was maybe 15,000 on it. And, you're just looking and looking. It takes hours and hours of your time, just to do that stuff. But now I have concentrated on moving those cameras. Like I may have 12 cameras in one park, and you get to know the wildlife that are in there. And so when, say, you see 20 deer every day or 10 deer or whatever it happens to be, but in the course of a year, you'll notice that you see the same bobcat, you see the same couple coyotes or whatever it happens to be. And then when you can notice also when something changes in your environment, in that ecosystem, like all at once, you'll have a week where your deer won't be there, or there's a lot less deer, or whatever it happens to be. And maybe it's a week or two out of the year. So something is in there disturbing those animals. It may or may not be a Bigfoot. It could be a big cat, or who knows what it could be, but it's important to recognize that something has changed it, and you keep track of that. And maybe,
so when you're saying big cat, and I'm not going to make my Starbucks pumpkin spice latte joke about the cougars, but you guys have like big cats in West Virginia?
Well, I mean, I think that it's fair to say that they're traveling through, I know I just heard a podcast today. The guy was talking about it in Kentucky and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, Tennessee has acknowledged them. There was one in New England that got hit a couple years ago that was a collar on. It was from South Dakota. So, they're around. I mean, they're probably rarer than Bigfoot is, when you think about it like that.
Right.
Like Ohio probably has more Bigfoot than bears, because it has less than 100 bears. So, there's some interesting things that you can, consider when when you're looking at it like that.
That definitely is interesting. So, a couple things you mentioned about the game cams. If I was going to buy a game camera, get started in doing that, what would you recommend? Where would I start with that?
I'd have a cheap one, the cheapest one I could find, and then I would have the best one I could find. So I use the cheap one, like if somebody thinks that they're feeding a Bigfoot, then I'll use, or maybe one's coming around their house, then I'll use the cheap one out there. And if whatever it is stops coming in, then maybe it's a Bigfoot or something. But if it's an animal of some type, they won't care about the loud camera. They'll still come in.
Yeah, we have a cheap one.
Yeah.
We have a cheap one in our backyard, but it's mainly just for like just curiosity, deer.
If you see a coyote.
More coyotes. More coyotes. We technically have coyotes in our area, and
oh yeah, I'm sure they're there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're here.
They're everywhere now.
Yeah, our cats are. We get afraid for our cats that go outside, but
rightfully so, probably.
Yeah, they were born out there, so they're fine. But another cat in our neighborhood got mauled by something, and it's probably a coyote.
Probably. Or a bobcat. But so you use the cheap one, like let's say that you have this hillside running and there's water's kind of loud right there, and you're thinking, oh, this is kind of disguised my good camera. So maybe you could put the good camera down there where it's loud, and then put your cheap camera up higher on the hill and try to shape the movement of animals coming around that may be leery, like an alpha male coyote. A lot of times they're leery of game cameras, or a Bigfoot. And so maybe you could push them down toward your better setup, so.
And have it distracted by the creek noise or whatever that's.
Yeah. So using your cameras, not necessarily just considering getting a picture, but using them to shape movement of animals in Bigfoot, and then using them to recognize change in the, animals that are around. If you have one camera out, and you're just not going to learn that much about a whole area. You could probably learn a lot about your yard, but if you're say in a park that's 20,000 acres or whatever it happens to be, you'd need like, a dozen of them or so that are out to get a really good idea about that. And then like I put them on, say you have a road that's gated and no one's allowed on that road, and maybe the rangers are on it like once a month, maybe a ride to make sure there's no, I don't know, whatever, trees down or something. So no one's really using that road at all. But, I would put it up with a camera up with a ladder, and then I can watch how many people are using that road, how many walkers, how many hunters, how many hikers. And then, like I can figure how far they're going by, their picture when it comes back. So if I say people are walking 30-minute miles, that's probably pretty quick. But if I see somebody come back, an hour and a half later, I know that, they probably didn't go farther than say, a couple miles, and I can judge how far back in I need to go to be past where everybody else is willing to go.
Oh, that's super
That
smart.
makes sense, yeah.
That is super smart.
Because this is probably what Bigfoot would do, right? It would stay back during the day in a place where people wouldn't go.
Right.
And then it would come forward to feeding areas, or, if it's around park and they're dumpster diving or trash cans or whatever it happens to be, or around people's houses, they're coming out, at night. We really only control our land, during the day. At night,
That's
anything
so
could be
true.
out there.
It's a whole different thing going on at nighttime.
I mean, just go out there and listen to the animals. I mean,
It's crazy.
Oh, it really is. The things are out there. And then, every week you'll get a report, maybe not every week, but once a month you'll hear from somebody. I know every animal. I've been in the woods my whole life, and I heard this animal. And the reality is, most people don't know the noises that they make. I mean, a lot of times all of us that are even out there are like not sure what something is. You're like, oh gosh, that's weird, but it's
there could be noises that animals are making that we don't even know that, animals that we know exist.
Exactly.
They make, and we don't even know it, Yeah.
I mean, coyotes, owls make weird sounds. I know on the West Virginia Bigfoot Facebook page, which I just started a couple of months ago, and it's up near 1,000 now, I think, like 800 or 900 people. And I put on there a couple different times animals that people commonly mistake for a Bigfoot. And one other thing I put on there was fishers. And a lot of people didn't know that there was even such a thing. They were like, I never even heard of that before. But, there's a lot of animals around, like in West Virginia, we can hunt bobcats, but I've only seen like 3 or 4 ever in the woods alive, but there's so many that we're allowed to kill a couple a year. Wow. But they're just rare, for us to be able to see them.
They're super elusive. you
They
know.
really are.
Yeah, I mean, I think cats in general, whether it's like a snow leopard or, a bobcat, they don't have a smell. They're very quiet. They're, ambush predators, so they just kind of hide, and they're also very nocturnal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will not realize they've been stalked by a mountain lion for hours.
I know, that's super scary.
And because they don't even know that they're being stalked by it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're so, stealthy, I guess.
Cougars will stalk.
Yes. Yes, they will.
Yellowstone did a study.
Your cougar, though, who stalked you.
Oh my gosh. Yellowstone did a study, where they had found that the grizzlies that they had, they were tagged or whatever, had the collars on, that they were following hunters, from a distance downwind. They recognize hunters shooting animals. It was an easy, way to get some food. So you can imagine that Bigfoot's learned that as well. Mm-hmm. And, you hear a lot of reports where people shoot things and they get there and their animal's gone or whatever it happens to be. And I think that that's reasonable to expect that happens.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So Russ, I want to pull up, if I can do this correctly again, your website, and I'll have you talk a little bit about this.
I don't think you're doing it right.
Russ, can you see it?
No.
Here it is. No, I got it. Here we go.
There. Okay, Sorry. There we go. Yay.
So this is the Bigfoot Doc website that you created. What's your goal with the website?
I want to say it was about 3 months ago. I was in this place and man, it's like so awesome. And there's sightings that come out of there. And I was standing on this, I don't know, I was back in maybe 3 miles and I was just looking over all these mountains and valleys. And I thought, what are the odds that I'm going to be in the right place at the right time? I mean, it's so tiny that I'm just going to happen to bump into something or find something that is legitimate, good evidence, something that's groundbreaking or earth changing. And so I started the website. I started being more active on social media, all in the aim of collecting more reports and trying to find active areas, maybe areas of habituation where people are having them around their house all the time. And I was trying to find one that's close so that I could skip the whole thing of just being out there hiking everywhere all the time. And 99% of the time, nothing happens. So that was the point of doing it. When I realized how, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use. It's just,
you can't cover all the ground yourself.
No, you just can't do it. Yeah. It's like, there's just so much stuff. There's not enough data. There's so much room. There's so much land, to just know a certain area. Like I go into an area and I'm like, if there's trails there, I'll use all the trails. And once I've covered all the trails, then I'll cover all the ridge tops. And when I do all the ridge tops, then I'll cover all the creeks, every hollow. And for instance, in one area of Ohio, which is Ohio's largest section, Dr. Kenny Brown and I, between the two of us over a period of like a year or two, have went in every single hollow, because I think that somewhere that they're staying there. Like I said, the big question is, let's say that you have a park and there's 100 cabins there, but it's surrounded by forest for miles. It's remote, that's maybe several miles just to the next little road, and it's just a park road. So how close are they staying to get in all those trash cans and those dumpsters? Are they like a hill over, or are they 6 miles away in some remote hollow and they don't think anything about coasting over there at night? Because for them, it's not that big a deal. They're quicker than we are, and, they know the best routes or whatever, the quickest, so I'm curious about these things about, how do you go about? And of course, it'd be different in every situation. Maybe in Ohio, there's just not that much room for them. So they're just in these little pockets where people don't go. But, just trying to find out where you think that they might be, trying to increase the data that everyone can use. It's just like the game cameras. If I find out that I can only get a picture on a north-facing hillside, and it has to be a slope, and there has to be a creek in the bottom, and You know, it's only where beech trees are, or whatever it happens to be, just making things up, that a lot of us will be able to get photos then. You know, I mean, once someone across the country figures out the way that you have to do it, whether it's you have to put 2 cheap cameras up and have a third one out there farther, or whatever it happens to be, at some point, I really think that, you know, some of us are, you know, going to be able to work it out. You know, can you get people to share that information? I don't know. I mean, people are.
Yes. Some feel that there are you know, some feel that people, hunters and people who live in these remote areas probably have photos and video that they just aren't going to share. And once this is proven to exist, then a lot of things are going to come out of the woodwork.
I say that in the book. I think that there's a lot more evidence out there than we know. And all of us that are serious about it have seen pictures that we're not allowed sharing or talking about, you know, beyond telling a story or whatever. But I suspect that when Bigfoot's acknowledged, that there's a lot of people that are going to come out that have shot one that was on their property. It was eating all their chickens. It was bothering their dogs. It got too close. They shot it and they just buried it. There's going to be people that have game cam pictures of ones. There's going to be video of them that, you know, people have, that people are just holding right now.
That's interesting.
Wild, yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before.
I think that you're going to be shocked when it comes out, how much evidence comes out all at once. But, you know,
Because
everybody's
maybe
so
they were afraid to
dismissive.
let it out for being
Called crazy or whatever. Yeah.
like, what would be
Yeah,
the
I mean,
reason of hiding that?
I think that there's some really good camera pics of Bigfoot right now and videos. But you just don't know unless it's somebody you legitimately know personally, whether it's legitimate or not. You know, there's a lot of them that, you know, there's websites that they show a different one every day, and some are good and some are not good.
Right.
And, you know, and I suspect that some of them are legitimate and people are getting them, but, you know, there's no way that any of us would ever know. That's why science will never accept largely that. Now, Doug Hychek, you know, him and I have talked, and that's probably why I started carrying the the GoPro camera on me, because Doug felt that if someone could get fairly close HD quality video, 4 seconds of it, that it might be enough that a lot of people would be compelled by it.
Or long-term situation where they're filming it for minutes or whatever, like a National Geographic quality type.
It's a
video.
big ask though, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy to get close to these things at all. You know, there's a reason why, you know, they have done what they've done generationally. They know where people are, where their people are not. I mean, one of the things I'm so interested in is how still they will hold. I mean, they will absolutely hold still and not move at all for long periods of time, like 10, 15, 20 minutes where they're completely frozen and will not move.
Wow.
And they will not move until, you know they've been sighted or spotted. I mean, there's a lot of videos that show where big bucks will hear, you know, a truck coming down a lane, a gravel road or something, and the bucks will actually lay down and hide their antlers underneath the tall grass and that kind of stuff. And, you know, I think that the Bigfoot do the same thing. You know, they're on the side of the road. They just squat down. They're a stump. They're whatever it happens to be. And I think it happens all the time.
Yeah. So they get overlooked. And I was talking to, actually, funny thing, I was talking to Mark DeWorth about that. He said people just sometimes aren't looking the right way. They're out there.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, just like, you know, when you're hunting a deer, you learn to look not only just for the motion. Everything in nature is easy to see if it's moving, but shapes, you know, sometimes it seems like anytime they stop, they always stop with a tree in front of them. Between you and them, there's always going to be a tree all the time. Even if it's a big animal and it's a tiny tree, they'll still be behind that tree.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because most of our vision is movement, you know, sensitive to movement. So if you're walking through the woods and there's one there behind, like even a tiny tree not moving, it'll just kind of blend in and wouldn't really stick out to us.
The famous forest ranger, park ranger Axon Jackson out of, you know, that was in the most remote sections of Yellowstone. remember after he retired, he came out and said he had a Bigfoot sighting. And, you know, he said that what was interesting about it is most animals will just take off and run, you know, away from humans when they see it, whether it's a bear or whatever it happens to be. But when he saw this Bigfoot, you know, it ran from tree to tree as it was going away from him. And
right in stealth mode, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things like that that are so interesting. Like right now I'm working on the first book I did was called Tracking the Stone Man. That was 7 years ago. And so I'm redoing the second edition for that. It'll be out after the first of the year. And there's those little things that you write down that you're like, where do I put this? I want to talk about this. But, you know, like we were talking about earlier, it's just not a big enough topic that you can, you know, that you can put it out there. But, you know, you're amazed by how still they can hold. You know, that one report that was so scary, you know, these girls came out of a rhododendron bushes and caught, you know, one standing in a creek, and it was only 12 feet from them, but it was half crouched, standing perfectly still, didn't move its eyes, didn't move anything. And they weren't even sure that it was real, you know, when they saw it. I mean, absolutely didn't move.
Wow.
You know, and so I think that if somebody showed me how many I'd probably walked by, deer, you know, all kinds of stuff, Bigfoot, I'm sure that I've walked right past them many, many times, you know, or they see you going, you know, cruising through or whatever, because, you know, you're on such a path, you know, you're on a mission. Tonight I'll be looking at maps and deciding where I want to walk out tomorrow, and I'm in a hurry to get to that place, you know, and then you're in a hurry to get back out because, you know, you need to
you're going from point A to B, but you're not paying attention what's in between.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to be, you know, conscious of these things, but it's just not always easy to do that.
Yeah, we're going to have you on. We're going to have you on one episode just to talk about witnesses, and then another episode just to talk about the books. So, I mean, there's so much we can talk to you about. So, and I'm going to encourage the audience, go to thebigfootdoc.com. You can check out what Russ is doing there. I think there's probably links to his books. He's got 2 books.
Yes.
Tracking the Stone Man. And for those who are seeing this, the Appalachian Bigfoot. And then, you know, we'll look forward to the 3rd book. Of course, Russ Jones and Brad Kennan are partners on the Untold Radio AM network. So make sure you check out their podcast and YouTube that airs every week. And they're amazing. They've been some really cool guests you guys had. You guys are doing, I mean, I'm just blown away by some
Absolutely.
stuff you guys
It's fun.
did, so yeah.
Enjoying it. It is fun. It is fun. It's super fun.
So. But yeah, thanks, Russ. This is awesome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on, guys.
And we love you, Russ.
Yes.
So you're coming back.
I love you too. Yeah, I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right, guys. So, you know, make sure you go to Untold Radio AM, like and subscribe. We're keeping Russ on here. He's just gonna stay till the end. So,
and so and you guys know how to follow us. You just have to put in the Bigfoot influencers, and it'll come up everywhere. But yeah, go on to Untold Radio, like and subscribe. This helps us get more content out to the audience. And you know, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. So we're everywhere. So. You know, and don't forget about our website too, the bigfootinfluencers.com.
Yeah, you can find everything there on the website. I have links to everything. We've been trying to get these podcasts up as they get aired right away. I think I might be one behind, but we'll get there. And you know, guys, thank you. Another episode down.
And thank you, Dr. Russ. We love you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks very much for having me on.
All right. And we'll see you at the next episode.